Hello and welcome. Thank you once again for joining me on my YouTube channel. And in the past video, we spoke about the history of Jamaica, part 3, the Morant Bay Uprising, and one of the two earliest heroes of Jamaica in Paul Bogle and George William Gordon. Now in this video, we're going to go on about the different diaspora of Jamaica, the different peoples. Right, so far, we've spoken about the Arawaks, the Tainos, who were there first, who came from Latin America, South America, I should say, 2,500 years ago. The Europeans in the form of the Spanish, Christopher Columbus, then the English. During that time, the importation of Negroes from sub-Saharan Africa as slaves to work in the plantation. Now, before I go on, I'd like to thank all my friends, family and subscribers for joining me once again. And if you are seeing me for the first time and you like what you hear, please like and subscribe. Just hit the subscribe button, and I could actually do with a share. Thank you. The different peoples of Jamaica, as I said, is the Arawaks, Europeans and Negroes from sub-Saharan Africa. There are other two more sets of people who make up Jamaicans. They are Indians from the Indian subcontinent, which is modern-day Pakistan, Bangladesh and India, and the Chinese, mainly Hakka. For now, we're going to concentrate on the immigrants from the Indian subcontinent. The Indian indenture system, which is based on the English indenture system which they used to colonize North America and the Caribbean, was a system of debt bondage, which these people basically sold themselves into slavery for 5 years, of which 3.5 million Indians were transported to various colonies of European countries. Towards the end of slavery, the British wanted Indians to work in Natal as workers, but the Indian refused. And so as a result, the British introduced the indenture system. Now, some scholars believe that the introduction of the indenture system was part of the British desire to hasten the abolition of slavery. The new system was expected to demonstrate the superiority of free over slave labor in the production of tropical products for the imperial market. The importation of manageable Indian workers was to diminish the competitive edge and bargaining power of freed slaves, thus marginalizing their position in the plantation system, which still persisted in the British colonies. The first ship to leave the Indian subcontinent for the Caribbean was the Whitby that left Calcutta in January of 1838 and arrived in British Guyana, which is now present-day Guyana, on the 5th of May 1838. Transportation to the Caribbean was actually halted in 1848 for a short while due to problems in the sugar industry, but resumed in Guyana and Trinidad in 1851 and in Jamaica in 1860 after the Morant Bay Uprising. Between 1842 and 1870, 15,169 people were imported into Jamaica from the Indian subcontinent. Now, most of those immigrants and their descendants would later on mix with the emancipated Negroes of the sub-Saharan Africa, and therefore there's not many Indians in Jamaica that are true blood Indians that can trace their lineage back to those first immigrants or settlers. Now, the final part of the Jamaican people are the Chinese. Most Chinese Jamaicans are Hakka and can trace their origin to the original indentured labourers who came to Jamaica in the mid-19th and early 20th centuries. The two earliest ships of Chinese migrant workers to Jamaica arrived in 1854, the first directly from China, the second composed of onward migrants from Panama who were contracted for plantation work. A further 200 would arrive in the years up until 1870, mostly from other Caribbean islands. But later in 1884, a third wave of 680 Chinese migrants would arrive, with the exception of a few from Sizup. Most of these migrants were Hakka, people from Bao'an, Bao'an, and Bao'an. This third wave of migrants would go on to bring more of their relatives over from China. The indentured system, which was introduced with the Indians, also introduced with the Chinese, which gave an influx of Chinese migrants to replace the outlaw system of black slavery. Now, it entails signing a 5-year contract for which they would be paid and given food and lodgings and medical care. Unlike the Indians, who came mainly to Jamaica by the indentured system, some of the Chinese actually were independent migrants who paid for their own passage to Jamaica and their families. The entire indentured system was outlawed in 1917 through the pressure from Gandhi, who was leading the national movement in India. In 1943, census showed 12,394 Chinese residing in Jamaica. Now, these were divided into 3 categories by the census, namely China-born, 2,818, local-born, 4,061, and Chinese-coloured, 5,515, the latter referring to the multiracial people of mixed African and Chinese descent. This made Chinese Jamaicans the second largest Chinese population in the Caribbean, behind Chinese Cubans. And by 1963, the Chinese had virtual monopoly on the retail trade in Jamaica, controlling 90% of dry goods stores, 95% of supermarkets, along with extensive holdings in other sectors as laundries and baking parlours, also bakeries. Unfortunately, because of this, in the 70s, thousands of Chinese Jamaicans fled, a wave of inter-ethnic violence against them. At first, they went primarily to Canada, which was more open to immigration than the United States, with the US becoming a major immigration destination later on. As a result, clusters of Chinese Jamaicans can be found outside Jamaica, primarily in locales in Toronto, New York City, South and South Florida. However, in the 1980s and 1990s, there was a new wave of Chinese migration to Jamaica, consisting of Hong Kong and Taiwanese entrepreneurs who set up textile factories on the island targeting the US market, and often brought migrant workers from China to start their ventures. With this, I will end part 4 of the history of Jamaica and the various diaspora. In part 5, the final part, we go on to their search for political freedom and independence. And if you like what you hear and like to hear more of my stories on history in the Caribbean, Latin America and North America, please hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you anon.